In Australia, we have a system of industry self-regulation, which means the advertising industry regulates itself, with ad standards overseeing the process. For years, Collective Shout, along with many others in this room, have argued the industry's self-regulation has been a dismal failure, calling for a complete overhaul of the entire system. Self-regulation may serve the interests of advertisers, but it does not serve the interests of the community. While some countries have adopted a more progressive approach to this issue, taking steps to ban sexist ads, Australia is not one of them. Ad Standards claim self-regulation is working. I do not accept that, and neither should you. For tonight's presentation, I've compiled a series of images taken from billboards, the insides of shopping centres, buses, TV commercials, and a little warning. Many of these might be regarded as offensive, sexist, porn-themed, and that's because they are. So I hope you'll be just as angry about this as I am, but if we could keep the heckling to the friendly kind, if we have to have heckling. So just like not taking it out of me, that would be fantastic. Okay, here we go. This is what industry self-regulation looks like. The freedom of sex shops in major shopping centres to reduce women to a series of body parts. Of strip clubs to erect billboards like these outside schools. Of clothing brands to depict gang rape in the CBD to sell jeans. And the freedom of the sex industry to promote pornography and prostitution to children on the very buses that take them to school, all with the endorsement of ad standards. Advertisers are permitted to sexualise, objectify, humiliate and demean women with impunity, emboldened by a weak and ultimately unenforceable code of ethics. We're not alone in our condemnation of industry self-regulation. We're joined with many other professionals and experts. In 2012, AMA President Dr. Steve Hambleton accused the advertising industry of targeting children, and he said, "These are highly sexualised ads that target children, and the advertising industry is getting away with it. The current self-regulatory approach through ad standards is failing to protect children." I'm just going to quickly walk you through the complaints process just so you can see how ridiculous it actually is. So the entire system, first of all, relies on members of the public lodging complaints. The burden is not on the industry or the regulatory body in charge of regulating the industry, but members of the public. There's no pre-vetting of advertisements. Most people don't know how to make a formal complaint, that there are avenues to do this, and if they do, they have to navigate a complicated, time-consuming process and different processes for different mediums, one for online content, one for outdoor advertising, TV commercials. I'm confused. I've been working in this space for years, and I'm always asking Melinda, what do I do? Who do I complain to? From the very outset, ad standards also makes it quite difficult to lodge complaints. They limit potential complaints by revising the definition of what constitutes advertising, and the conditions under which a person is permitted to make a complaint in the first place. And what this means for them is, there's less complaints for them to actually process. And it also means more favourable stats for them, because if they're excluding a sizable portion of the advertising they would have to consider, then that means they're not having to, include that in the statistics of all the ads that aren't any good, and that looks bad for them. Now, assuming you actually get that far, so you've made a complaint. Once the complaint has been submitted, the process waiting for ad standards to make a ruling can take weeks or even months. And all the while, the offending advertising remains in place, still doing its job, serving its purpose, advertising the product. Advertisers have been known to exploit the holes in this system. Some deliberately release really shocking or misogynistic content, knowing that this is going to get them, controversy and outrage and media attention. So this is actually going to work in their favour, so they can exploit the system, get greater publicity, and there's no consequences for them. And they often withdraw their ad before ad standards even rules against them. Now, when complaints are actually upheld, advertisers found in breach of the code are not even inconvenienced in any way. Many advertisers report that the current campaign has concluded at this point, and they're quite prepared to take it down because the next one's due to go out. So a ruling from ad standards doesn't actually disrupt their business anyway. Ad standards determinations are meaningless because the code of ethics is voluntary, which means advertisers are not obligated to comply with rulings. And some don't, like Wicked Campers, who brought us slogans such as, "In every princess there is a little slut who wants to try it just once," and "Wife, an attachment you screw on the bed to get the housework done." Despite having had complaints upheld on more than 60 different Wicked Camper vans, Wicked Campers remains. These are still out there because ad standards has no authority to actually get them to do anything, and Wicked Campers, there's no penalties for non-compliance, so why would they stop? Academic Lauren Guerrieri wrote in The Conversation, "Even when consumers complain in droves about certain advertisements, such as the ultra-tune advertisements that blatantly demean, sexualise and objectify women, complaints are often dismissed." I'm sure most of us in this room are familiar with the notoriously sexist ultra-tune advertisements. The same two sexy women constantly find themselves in a variety of unlikely predicaments due to their stupidity, such as driving a car through a car wash with the top down, or getting stranded on train tracks, or accidentally driving off a cliff because women are just that dumb. And the entire premise of these ads is the humiliation of women to sell tyres. Again, complaints against these ads are typically dismissed. Does this sound like an effective system? Turning now to sex industry advertising. Apologise for this one. In theory, advertisers are required to treat sex, sexuality and nudity with sensitivity to the relevant audience. In reality, ad standards permits sex industry advertising in public spaces on the basis that the advertising is relevant to the product. A life-size poster of this image, I couldn't actually find the poster, but it's the same image taken from their website. So a life-size poster of this was located on a busy Adelaide street. And here's what ad standards responded to complainants with. The board noted the complainant's concern that the advertisement depicts an image of an almost naked woman that focuses on her bottom and that this is not appropriate for outdoor display where children can view it. The majority of the board, however, noted that the advertisement is promoting a seductive competition between Australia's most desirable ladies and considered that the image is relevant to the advertised product. And this is a very common defence. The product, of course, being the bodies of women, made available for men's purchase and consumption. Last year, ad standards dismissed complaints over Sexpo ads featuring the URL to live-streamed porn and prostitution sites. And my colleague Melinda will be speaking about this a little later tonight. Now, when it comes to outdoor advertising, particularly mobile advertising, like a bus that moves around, the relevant audience is everyone. Parents might be able to turn off a TV, but you can't turn off a bus. And you can guess what ad standards said. They ruled these ads for live pornography and prostitution websites did not breach the code. A Collective Shout supporter shared her experience of coming across sex industry advertising while out with her 5-year-old son. She says, "Catching a tram in the city today and what should pull up but the tram emblazoned with ads for Sexpo. My son turns to me and asks, 'Mama, what's Sexpo?' While I am totally happy to explain the facts of life to my kids in a way sensitive to their development, when they are interested, I could not be more angry and disgusted that it was the sex industry who should be the first ones to put the word sex into my 5-year-old's mouth. And this is just the first of many times over the years that exploitative commercial interests will be protected over and above my son's right to develop a healthy sense of self and sex. The Ad Standards Board will dismiss my complaint. Our media and ad regulation system is scandalously, devastatingly broken. It breaks our children, it breaks our community, and today it has broken my heart." Ad Standards frequently dismisses complaints about sexualised advertising, arguing that the ad in question is only mildly sexualised and not inappropriate for viewing by a broad audience, including children. Here's a few examples of ads Ad Standards did not believe were sexualised. billboard promoting BDSM-themed 50 Shades of Grey line of lingerie did not present strongly sexualised imagery. An ad for men's razors featuring a woman performing a striptease. Click here to see what happens next. Not sexualised, obviously. This billboard image, the photo from serial sexual predator Terry Richardson, which might not surprise some of you, not inappropriately sexual, so appropriately sexual. We've long argued that the objectification of women should be regarded as a discriminatory practice, one that should be considered to constitute sexual harassment and treated as threats to the health, well-being, and status of women and girls. Ad Standards does not address concerns about sexual objectification or even seem to grasp the concept. They frequently dismiss complaints of sexual objectification because, as they say, there's no explicit nudity or no private parts showing, or because images are only mildly sexualised, like we've seen, or because the women being objectified appear confident and in control. But treating women as sexualised props and defining them by their sexual appeal harms women as a whole, even if advertisers portray them as confident sexualised props. The sexual objectification of women may occur with or without nudity, with or without the presence of visible nipples or genitals, as we can see here. This is just a small selection of the representation of women in advertising. Hypersexualised, headless, faceless, reduced to a series of dissected body parts, defined by their sexual availability, posed as decorative or passive, or even victims of violence. Does anyone really believe that this everyday dehumanisation of women is harmless so long as there's no private parts showing? Ad Standards fails to engage with decades of research on the harms of sexual objectification. The evidence linking the routine objectification of women with a diminished view of women's competence, morality, and humanity, or even men's violence against women. Investigating complaints on a case-by-case basis does not work here. A single standalone ad that objectifies women might not seem like a big deal, but what if the dominant representation of women and the world around us depict women as sexual objects? As Women's Action Alliance stated, mild, individual instances of sexually objectifying advertising of women all add up to the dehumanisation of women as a social class. I've said tonight that Ad Standards goes to great lengths to justify sexist and sexually objectifying depictions of women in advertising. For time's sake, I've included just a few examples. Now, in each of these cases, complaints were dismissed and the advertising was permitted. Zoo Magazine, 2 reasons to like our Facebook page. Complaints were dismissed on this basis. The board noted that the advertisement features a close-up image of a pair of breasts and considered that whilst the image is exploitative of a woman's body, it is in keeping with the content of Zoo Magazine. Green light from Ad Standards. Thank goodness for them, huh? General Pants Co. This is a major youth retailer found in shopping centres around the country. So here we have bikini-clad teen girls reclining in the bath alongside the slogan, "Wet Dreams." And here's what Ad Standards said this time. The women are not posed in a manner that is sexualised. And the reference to Wet Dreams is linked primarily to the competition to win an overseas trip to Dubai. Did anyone catch that? I think I was distracted by the phrase wet dreams. Seriously. And another one. Anyone guess what this ad is actually for? Anyone? Not milk? Oranges, what was that? Porridge. No. Should I just tell you? Oh, yeah. Someone knows this one. Coffee beans, obviously. Come on, guys. Okay, so we made a complaint against this one. Again, Ad Standards dismissed complaints, and here's their rationalisation. The headless woman is voluntarily pouring the milk over herself. Over herself, guys. Ad Standards claims self-regulation is working. I do not accept that. And like I've said, neither should you. Earlier this year, as a result of years of campaigning, the AANA Code of Ethics was updated. Previously, under Section 2.2 of the Code, advertisements were in breach if they were found to be both exploitative and degrading. It was okay to degrade women, and it was okay to exploit women, just not both. Now, yes, that's right, updates to the code mean the use of sexual appeal in advertising cannot be exploitative or degrading. This is a step forward, and one that may result in complaints being upheld for a greater proportion of sexist ads. But this is not nearly enough. So other countries are doing much better than Australia in lots of these issues, actually, but particularly in this one. So earlier this year, Paris followed both London and Geneva in banning sexist and discriminatory ads. Ads including sexist stereotypes, degrading, dehumanising and offensive representations of women and men, or images that adversely affect human dignity will not be permitted. A city in Norway has also banned adverts featuring semi-naked women that could contribute to body image issues on young people. The state government in Berlin has moved to ban all sexist advertising on state-owned spaces, a move that I will add has been strongly opposed by the advertising industry. What a shock. Stockholm, Sweden introduced guidelines against sexist and racist advertising. Earlier this year, this one's my favourite, Rio introduced laws against sexist ads with hefty fines for violators. Initial fines range from $10,000 to $200,000, and repeat offenders face fines of up to $400,000. Imagine if advertisers were actually held accountable, if exploiting women was going to cost them money. I think we'd see significant change pretty quickly, don't you? Why aren't we doing that here? Whoops, that was great formatting. My bad. The current system is a failure, and I think we all know it's a failure. The advertising industry fosters a culture of sexual objectification of women. Why do we have to resign ourselves to a broken system? In response to government inquiries, Collective Shout has made a series of recommendations for changes to be implemented, and you can see some of them here, such as an independent body to take on this role, rather than one that has a vested financial interest, and the power to pre-vet outdoor advertising, and the onus of regulation being placed on the industry rather than individuals, members of the public, having to step in and actually do their job. And the Code of Ethics needing to take into account, the research on sexualisation and objectification and the harms from these issues to children and to women and to men, and looking at these issues as being confronted by pornified and sexualised imagery as sexual harassment. We wouldn't tolerate it in a workplace. Why do we have to tolerate it walking down the street? Also asking that the regulatory body be required to consult with experts in these fields. And again, this is a big one, substantial financial penalties for breaches. That could be a real game changer, I think. We need brave politicians willing to take on this cause, and they need to know that there's a constituency for change. There's lots of people behind them saying, yes, this is what we want and we're going to fight for it. We're in the middle of a national conversation about the epidemic of men's violence against women. Each week we count dead women while our leaders condemn this tragic violence. Are we to believe that these staggering levels of male violence against women are somehow unrelated to a culture in which women are routinely reduced to object status, treated as decorative or as existing for men's use? Challenging the everyday sexualised depictions of women is only one piece of the puzzle, but it's a critical one. We need to see a shift in the representations of women in media, advertising and popular culture, and that's where Collective Shout steps in. It's my hope that this summit is a turning point, that we can come together and we can turn our ideas into action and move forward. Thank you.